Hi, everybody. Welcome to JSNation. My name is Sasha Greif, and today I'm going to talk about the state of the web. And now I realize this is a pretty broad topic, so more specifically, what I have learned about the state of the web through running web development surveys. So what do I mean by that? Well, every year I organize a bunch of open surveys online. Anybody can take them. The biggest one is probably the state of JS, but there's also state of CSS, state of HTML. And just out of curiosity, raise your hand if you've taken one of these surveys before. Okay, so quite a few people. So first of all, thank you for participating, because if you didn't, I probably wouldn't be here talking about it today. But I don't have that much time, so I want to jump right in and talk about the state of JS. The latest edition took place in November of last year. And as you might imagine, I asked developers a lot of questions. And that's actually what I want to do with you guys today as well. Because this is not going to be a boring old talk. It's going to be a live interactive quiz. Now, I know what you're thinking. They just showed you another quiz. I didn't know that. I thought I was being very original and very innovative. But at least my quiz won't have any trick questions about Greta Thunberg or Billie Eilish. And so, well, you might be thinking, how do I participate? How do I, keep track of my score? And you can do that using something almost all of us have today, which is this, your fingers. So you can count on your fingers. We will all start with 3 lives, and then for every wrong answer, you lose 1. And we'll see who makes it all the way to the end. There will only be 10 questions, so hopefully a bunch of you make it through. But let's start with a really easy one. What were the 3 most used front-end frameworks in the latest State of JS survey? So A, Svelte Solid HTMX, all great libraries, but maybe not the most widely used. B, Backbone, Knockout, and Mootools. Now, if you've never heard of these, don't worry, you haven't missed like the newest front-end library coming out the past couple of weeks. It just means you're probably under 30 years old. And then C, React, Vue, Angular. So I think it's easy enough to figure this one out. Of course, it's C, React, Vue, Angular. Number 2, so in the survey, we asked not only what respondents use, but also how they feel about it. So people could say if they like or dislike the framework they use. And one framework in particular had a lot of positive opinions and came in first. And so which one do you think it might be? I'll give you a couple seconds to figure it out. The answer was C, Solid. So if we look at the data, these are the state of JS results. Solid is actually that yellow-orange line all the way at the top. And not only was it number 1 last year, it has been number 1 for the last 4 editions. So pretty impressive. Number 2 is Svelte, the green line. And then number 3 is actually Vue.js making a comeback to get number 3. So these are rankings, but if you look at the absolute value, you can actually see that most libraries are towards the top of the charts here, above 70% satisfaction. So I think that's interesting, because we often have this image of JavaScript developers complaining about their framework and being quite negative. But the truth is, when you look at the data, people actually enjoy, for the most part, using those frameworks. And I think that's a testament to the work being done every day by the maintainers of each of these projects.
It was fun because I used to love coming to planetariums as a kid, and now I get to stand in one and present. So yeah, great venue for a conference.
So one of the things I like the most about this conference is it's after a talk, there's a discussion room where you can just go talk with people about the thing.
In my 15 to 20 years of speaking, this is the nicest venue of any conference I have been to.
So let's talk about TypeScript. Question number 3. Among survey respondents, there are more developers who A, only use JavaScript, B, use 50% JS, 50% TypeScript, or C, only use TypeScript. Now, this is among survey respondents, right? So it's not necessarily among the entirety of the JavaScript population throughout the world, but among the subset of respondents who took the survey. Turns out the largest group is C, people who only use TypeScript. And if you look at the chart, it's actually quite striking that the largest bar here at the bottom is people who use 100% TypeScript, while at the top you have a few people who don't use it at all. And I think it goes to show that today TypeScript, not only is TypeScript mainstream, but it's actually becoming the default way of writing code for the web. So there's this thing called the TC39 committee, which decides on which features the JavaScript language is going to get next. And they consider a lot of proposals every year. But one of them is not a real proposal. So is it A, explicit resource management, B, temporal, C, reverse threading, or D, decorators? So which one do you think is the fake proposal? And the answer is C, reverse threading. That's not a thing. The other ones, though, are very real. And in fact, they are the first 3 results when we asked respondents which upcoming proposals they were the most excited about. And so number 1 here by a long shot is temporal, which is going to be a new way to handle dates and times in the browser, and which hopefully will let us rely a bit less on third-party libraries like Moment.js and so on. Now, reverse threading, in case you're wondering, is something that has to do with bolts and screws. But who knows, we might have it in JavaScript too at some point. So, OK, I know, don't run away. I know it's not JSNation today, but I still wanted to include a couple questions about CSS. And in the survey, we asked respondents which feature they had enjoyed the most over the past year. So not necessarily something that came out in the past year, just something that they started using. And so which one do you think was number 1? Has, add container, subgrid, or float right? It's probably not going to be float right, because even back then, nobody enjoyed it that much. But the real answer is actually A, has. Now, has is a really cool new CSS feature that lets you basically target an element not based on its parents, like you would usually do in CSS, but on its children, so what it contains. And it really opens the door to doing a lot of new things with CSS. And so that was people's favorite new feature. But you might be thinking, well, that's all well and good to have all these new fancy CSS features, but it's not really that useful if you can't actually use them in browsers. So that's what this next question is about. As of June 2025, which of the 4 major browsers support the CSS has selector? A, none of them. B, only Chrome. C, Chrome and Firefox, or finally, D, all four. So which browser support has? And the answer is actually D, all four. So there's actually this thing called a baseline indicator, which is a standard convention developed by browser vendors to let us know what's safe to use or not. And has the status newly available, meaning it is supported in all four browsers and has been, in fact, since December 2023. By the way, when you are browsing through the State of CSS survey results, you can actually click any feature and get extra info on it, including the baseline status and also links to MDN, Can I Use, and other resources. So another survey we did last year was the State of HTML, and I want to stay on the topic of baseline. So here's another question. If the baseline indicator says a feature is widely available, which is the final stage of baseline, it means it's A, supported by a majority of users, B, used by over 50% of the top 100 websites, C, supported by major browser for 30 months, or D, available at your local supermarket. So probably not D. But the real answer is actually gonna be C, supported by major browsers for 30 months. And that's the case of a feature like aspect ratio, another CSS property, for example, which might seem like it's fairly new, but in fact, it's been over 2 years, 30 months, since it became newly available, since it became well supported. So this issue of browser interoperability is something that we ask a lot about in the surveys, including here this question in the State of HTML survey, which is about the features that people would want to use but cannot because of poor browser interoperability, this is really hard to say, or browser support. And number one here is the popover API, followed by anchor positioning, and the view transition API. Now, what's interesting to know, I think, is that there's actually an initiative from browser vendors called Interop, which is that every year they get together, so the Chrome team, Safari, Edge, Firefox, and so on, and they decide which areas to focus on to fix those problems so that we can all use these cool new features. And so in 2025, the focus areas are anchor positioning, backdrop filter, core web vitals. And what's cool is that one of the ways that they prioritize these features, one of the data points they consider when drafting that roadmap is the data from the State of HTML survey, the State of CSS survey, and so on. So I think it's quite cool to know that the browser vendors are actually receptive to feedback, and that one of the ways you can make your voice heard is by completing these surveys. But let's switch gears now and talk a little bit about AI. So we had another survey called the State of Web Dev AI, and there's a ton of AI surveys out there. A lot of them are even called the State of AI, so I'm not the only one. But what makes this one different is it's not a survey of AI developers, it's a survey of how web developers, like all of us basically, use AI, or maybe don't use AI, because that's really what I wanted to figure out, like how common is AI use really? So here's a question for you guys. What percentage of respondents to the survey do you think generate the majority of their code via AI? So not even like all their code, just more than half of their code. And I have to say the result kind of surprised me when I saw it, because it turns out only 22% of respondents fit in that bucket. So, yeah. So you can see here at the top of the chart is people who do not use AI at all. And at the bottom is the people who use AI for everything, and there's only 11 of them. And the majority is in the middle, or actually towards the top of the chart. And that's my case speaking personally. So I use ChatGPT from time to time to maybe generate a helper function or a component or some styles. But I haven't used Cursor or any of the newer tools to vibe code entire apps just before breakfast, like you see on social media. And I think that's still the majority of people in that case. So if you are like me, like a lot of survey respondents, still coding apps by hand, don't feel bad about it. Don't feel any FOMO towards the AI crowd, because I think we are still the most common use case. And finally, the last survey I want to talk about today is the state of devs. So this one took place in April of 2025. So it's very fresh, and in fact, it's so fresh that the data isn't even out yet. So you're getting an exclusive sneak preview of those results. The other thing that makes this survey special is that unlike the other surveys, which were about JS, CSS, AI, this one was not about code at all. Instead, it was about all the other things that make us who we are. Your career, your workplace, but even things like your health and hobbies. So as part of that survey, one thing we asked about was your job title. And it turns out there's one kind of job title in particular which is correlated with a higher income. So do you think it's A, developer, B, engineer, C, webmaster, or D, consultant? Now, as much as I personally would like webmaster to make a comeback, I think it's, the 90s are cool again these days, so who knows? Probably not going to be C. But the answer, it turns out, is B, engineer. So if you look at the data, here are job titles with median income. And if you look at all the engineer jobs, they tend to be at the top, while the developer jobs tend to be more towards the bottom. So with the caveat that correlation is not causation, just to be safe, I would suggest updating your resume and switching from front-end developer to front-end engineer, if you can. And finally, our last question of the day. The top hobby enjoyed by developers is A, video games, movies, reading, or sport. Now, hey, don't laugh. That's not fair. I think a lot of developers do enjoy sport. In fact, I do bouldering, so if anybody want to go climbing later, let's go together. But no, sadly, the stereotype is true. So for extra credit, does anybody want to guess what the most popular specific video game was? Just yell out some video game names. Yeah?
Pac-Man.
Pac-Man? No, sorry. Maybe in the 1973 survey, Pac-Man would have won. But in the 2025 survey, the result was Baldur's Gate 3. Yeah. And that game came out not that recently, but I think it's so long that people are still playing it. Number 2 was Balatro, which I also played, but I had to stop pretty quickly because I could feel myself getting addicted by the minute. So let's count how many lives remaining we have. If you have 0 lives remaining, you didn't make it to the end, sorry, but you can still call yourself a developer. Now, if you have 1 life remaining, you survive, congratulations. You can upgrade your title to architect. So instead of front-end developer, you're now a front-end architect. It's the same thing, same job, but it sounds a lot fancier. If you have 2 lives remaining, you only made a single mistake. So you are a very reliable person. You can be lead, front-end lead, and lead us to our promised JavaScript future. We'll follow you. But now, if you have all your lives remaining, raise your hand. Let's see. Nobody? Really? I'm sure there's going to be at least one person. So hypothetically, if somebody had survived with all their lives remaining, they would deserve the ultimate title of engineer. So what have we learned today? Probably not much, but still. One, you can use more new CSS features than you think. Thanks to tools like Can I Use and Baseline, it's easy to keep track of new CSS features, and the browser vendors are doing a really good job these days of making sure that they quickly become supported. 2, TypeScript is now the default. It took me a really long time to start using TypeScript myself, but I think it's just the way the ecosystem is going at this point. 3, most developers don't use AI that much, at least not yet. People are talking about developers being replaced by AI. I don't think that's going to happen because, after all, there will still need to be people who write code manually, if only for AI to be able to plagiarize it. And then, finally, the web is changing fast, and surveys can help you keep up. Not only because when you take the survey, you are exposed to a lot of new features, new libraries that you might not know about, but also when you review the results, you can learn about upcoming trends, and the results themselves can serve as a jumping off point to browse other resources. Speaking of taking surveys, there is a survey open right now, the State of CSS 2025, so you can go ahead and take it right now. Well, maybe not right now, wait until the end of the event. But yeah, I wanted to thank you for taking the surveys. Thank you for participating in my little quiz. And I hope you have a great JSNation. Thanks.
Yeah, let's kick it off with just a question I have for you. What is the biggest challenge in reaching people with this survey?
Wow, that's a great question. So I think it's a dual challenge. Here. Oh, thanks. One challenge is just reaching as many people as I can, right? And so you can rely on things like podcasts. I don't know if you know any good podcasts about
Possibly
web development that might spread the word. But then another challenge is, making sure you don't reach an audience that is too biased in one direction. So, for example, if let's say the Foo.js posts a link to the survey on their homepage, then Foo.js is going to be overrepresented in the survey. And that's even more true for things like gender diversity, country diversity, racial diversity. So if you want to increase those factors and make sure that the survey represents a broad population, then actually being more deliberate about how you reach out to people is also important. So I'm still looking for the right answer to that question, but it's definitely a big challenge every year.
Yeah. So you've been doing these surveys a long time now. In your mind, what's the most surprising thing overall that has shown up in any of the data?
The fact that I'm still doing them.
Yeah.
No, in the data, I think the positivity overall, people don't hate JavaScript as much as you'd think. I don't know. When I maybe things have changed because I think a lot of really great work has been put into the ecosystem. But 8, 9 years ago, we were all talking about JavaScript fatigue, right? The idea that picking a framework is too hard, there's too many new frameworks, and so on. But if you look at the data over all these past years, first of all, there aren't that many new frameworks. React, Vue have been around for a decade. Svelte has been around for like 5 years or something. So things are not changing that much, at least in those terms. And then people actually really appreciate those tools. So I would say that was a real nice surprise.
Yeah. All right. Looks like I can actually get on the Wi-Fi now. So, also, folks, if you're changing tracks, could we make sure we keep it down a little bit so that way we can all hear Sasha? So let's see. Let's do this first one. Is the low AI usage a we are not allowed to use AI? What do you think?
Yeah, good question. That's not the impression I have, but I'm also not sure that's something that the survey specifically asked about. So I could definitely ask about that next year. That's a really good idea. But I think the impression I get is that people just haven't, started using AI more than they are not allowed to. So because the survey also asked about, not only do you use AI, yes, no, but which tools you asked. And so ChatGPT, for example, is definitely used a lot, as you might expect. But things like Cursor or, code generators like Bolt or V0, those are used far less. So to me, it seems more like ChatGPT is becoming mainstream, but there's still some lag for more specialized tools. And I would expect that lag to kind of diminish, so the other tools to become more popular as well. But I still think it will happen at a slower rate than what AI proponents might be predicting.
Let's see, we got another one here. How many participants do you have per survey, and which of the surveys is the most successful?
So I think the most successful ever was the State-of.js a couple years back when we had over 20,000 participants. These days, it really depends because, if one popular YouTuber like Fireship or whoever mentions the survey, that can drive a couple thousand respondents. So it's very, very unstable, I would say. But usually around 10,000 respondents for the biggest surveys and maybe 5,000 for the smaller ones.
Wow, yeah. Let's see. Actually, I like this question. Do you need to do a lot of manual work to normalize the survey data? Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of responses that are all kind of similar, right, in text form?
Yeah, I feel whoever asked that question is like sitting behind me when I work at home because, yeah, that's a big part of what I do. So the survey can have a predefined questions where you pick an answer from, checkboxes, radio buttons, and so on. But it also has a lot of free-form questions where you just type in your answer. And so there's a lot of work required to transform that into usable data. But I am trying to automate that as much as possible. So part of the automation is done using regex just to pattern match on keywords. Also, I'm trying out ChatGPT and other LLMs to do some of that pattern matching, which can also work, although it's not super reliable yet. So I still need to review and kind of approve each suggestion one by one.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a lot of data to comb through, too. Next one here. How do you select questions subjectively?
So what happens is for every survey, I will put up a preview of the survey so actually going even back even further, at the end of the survey, you can suggest new questions for the next edition. So there's a specific question asking people how they would like to see the survey evolve. There's also going to be a GitHub issue asking people to suggest new ideas. And that issue is open like the whole I opened the issue for 2026 in 2025, basically. So they have 1 year to give feedback. Based on those two things, I will then create a survey preview for the upcoming edition of a survey, and that will stay open for about a month. And during that time period, people can suggest new questions, comment on existing questions. And at the end of the preview period, then I finalize the survey and launch it. So you can have people have 3 separate chances to affect what the next survey will look like and make their opinion known. And so it's a mix of course, my own subjectivity, I guess, because I'm still curating the questions, but also a community input.
Yeah, and you've had a lot of experience doing these. So,
Yes, I guess so.
so next question here is, I thought 22% using AI over half of their code is actually huge. Is there a selection bias towards enthusiasts?
So that's a great question. It's something I try to avoid. So having, of course, if you do a survey about AI, people who like AI are more likely to do it because people who hate AI will say, hey, it's not for me. But in our emails to our mailing list, I specifically said, please take the survey even if you hate AI. If you don't use AI, we also want to hear your voice. So hopefully it mitigated the bias a little. But of course, you can't really mitigate it completely.
Nice. Next one here. Why did you start doing these surveys?
So that's something people ask me a lot. And back then, I was using a framework called Meteor.js. I don't know if you've ever heard about it.
Big fan.
And Meteor.js, the whole point was that it was all-in-one. So it did the server, client, templating, whatever. The problem is when I stopped using it, when I ventured out of that bubble, I was very confused by the broader JavaScript ecosystem, and I know you can relate.
Yes.
And so that was the original impulse for the first survey. I wanted to figure out for myself which technology to invest my time in after being, spending so much time in a very self-contained ecosystem.
Nice. Well, thank you so much, Sasha. This has been amazing.
Hey, thank you.
Great talk. Thank you.